everyone, so today's field trip is to a salt marsh, which is another one of the ecosystems that's really important to Maine's intertidal. This particular salt marsh is in Brunswick and it's really close to campus. So you can get here by going to Coleman Farm and taking some of the trails down, and you can get here for yourself. So salt marshes are typically formed in areas of low wave energy. And so this is up inside a cove along the coast, and you can see that there's very little wave energy in this environment. So again, the theme of zonation is really important when we're talking about salt marshes, just like when we talk about the Rocky Intertidal and any other ecosystem, zonation. And so these animals or plants that form the zones in the salt marsh, you have to realize are terrestrially derived animals. So given a choice, they would prefer to be up on land, but because of competition and predation up on land, they've been pushed down into the salt marsh, and they're being pushed to their limits of their physiological limits, just like in the Rocky Intertidal. Except in this area, high in the salt marsh is the least stressful place. So closer to the terrestrial border is the least stressful place. And the top zone former that we have in the salt marsh is this rush called Juncus girardii. You need to know this one. This is the rush. It's a perennial, and it forms the highest zone in the salt marsh. Has a beautiful bellflower. As we move down the salt marsh, conditions become a little bit more stressful. So the Juncus lives highest in the salt marsh, and I should mention before we go any further, this does not always get flushed by every tide. So these do experience some salt water, but not as much. As we move down into the salt marsh, we're in the middle part of the salt marsh here, and the zone former in this part is Spartina patens. And you can remember, because you can think that it looks like it's been pet down. You can see these like mats, how they lay down. And it has a beautiful seed head. Let's see if we can find a seed head. Has a beautiful seed head that alternates. This is a perennial plant, and it forms the middle of the salt marsh. This part of the salt marsh will get flushed by most high tides. So twice a day, this area will be flushed with clean ocean water coming in. And as we move further down in the salt marsh, the lowest part of the salt marsh, we get to the Spartina alterniflora zone. And this is still mixed in here, but you can see that we're in the Spartina alterniflora. This is a grass, and its seed head is kind of messy when it goes to seed, but it has these spikes at the top. And this is another perennial plant, and it inhabits the low zone of the salt marsh. So again, zonation is important in the salt marsh. And another thing to remember is these environments tend to be low nutrient environments. So that's just something to consider. So high in the salt marsh, near the terrestrial border, we have the Juncus girardii, the least stressful part of the environment. Middle of the salt marsh, we have Spartina patens that gets flushed by the ocean twice a day in Maine. And then low in the salt marsh, we have Spartina alterniflora, the most stressful conditions in the salt marsh. And those are the three zone formers that you'll learn.